Welcome. This is another Technical Technician video from Diognation. This is going to be a quick video. We're going to basically talk about input-output relationships with the oscilloscope. We're going to be on 7 channels. We're going to talk about the high-priority inputs, the crank sensor and the 2 cam sensors into the PCM, and the outputs. In this case, we're just going to be looking at the 4 individual ignition coil triggers. In another video, I'll come back and we'll look at the fuel injectors. But I just want to concentrate on the inputs of the crank sensor and the 2 cam sensors as they go into the PCM, and the PCM controls the triggers on the output to create ignition. On the scope, we're going to see that direct relationship between these the inputs, the crank and the 2 cams, and how they line up. They're right in sync with the triggers of the ignition coils. If we ever have a situation where we're diagnosing a misfire, and what happens if a portion of our input triggers missing, what does that affect our output? It could be a specific cylinder at a specific time. So anyway, I will take you to the scope, and we got the car running. We're on 7 channels. Take a snapshot of the illustration. I will run it by, how you doing? No, I'm good. Just shooting a video, just making a video. Automotive video. Yeah. Okay, yeah, just, did I tell you the channels? Okay, you got to see it. Blue, A is ignition coil 1, red, B, ignition coil 2, green, ignition coil 3, mustard or golden mustard brown is 4, ignition coil 4, purple E is the crank sensor, F is the intake cam, and G, orange, is the exhaust cam sensor. We're back to the scope, and we're rolling across the scope. The car's running, and we'll kind of just take a look, and let's hope we don't get that wind, a gust of wind coming in. Anyway, we're running, and you can see everything. Clarity's not the greatest. I'll try to zoom in to make it better. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right, hang on. Okay. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Okay, I'll stop the scope and we'll analyze. I'll stop the car and we'll talk about it. Okay, basically, okay, on the bottom is our crank signal, and get this wind here. Boy, I tell you, the wind's coming in, man. Okay. All right, we're stopped here. We got about 14 frames. We're at 200 milliseconds per division. We'll go back to the first capture and concentrate on each of our signals. And I'll kind of look at the crank sensor first. Let's kind of key in on that. That's our crank here. And we're going to watch how the crank lines up with, we got to consider our 4 outputs. Those are the 4 ignition coils. You know, cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4, colored blue, red, green, and yellow in this case. I'll get them on the top so we can see them better. So they stand out. I want to stretch them too so we can get more visibility. And then okay, oh, overshot it. All right, and then red is here. Okay, on the top of our screen, in the same plane are our ignition coils, our ignition strikes. We got one red, we got one. This is 1, 3, 4, 2, the firing order. And that is a fire cycle right here. So kind of look at our blue guy here. That's our ignition strike for 1. What do the inputs have in common with 1? What lines up with 1? Channel orange is our exhaust cam, and we can see the relationship where our cylinders fall within the trough of each portion of the exhaust cam in a certain area. Think about that. If one of these notches on the exhaust cam signal were missing, would that create a misfire? That's something to ponder. But then again, we see that relationship. Let's go and bring up our other cam signal. We'll bring this guy down, and then we'll bring up this is our intake cam signal, and we can see that that relationship between the gray channel, and here's ignition strike 1, there's 3, 1, 4, 2. You can see it's a little off to the left of each ignition strike. Nonetheless, that's the relationship they have. Let's get back to our, I want to do this once more, see an ignition strike. See if you see anything that lines up perfect. So if we can make a comparison, we'll get this guy down. But nonetheless, our exhaust camshaft lines up in the trough right there, our orange exhaust camshaft. Let's look at a fire cycle there. So you can see the exhaust cam, the trough of the exhaust cam signal and the ignition strike. They're all equidistant from it when they're on their spot in the trough. So say to yourself, well, if somebody was missing like a chip trigger tooth on a rotating wheel, something like that, could that cause a misfire? Think about something like that. That could send you down a rabbit hole if you're not considering it. Let's take a look at the other rotating component. I just want to get one more view. Then we'll pull the crank into the we'll do one at a time, so we don't get we're not too crowded. At a fire cycle here, and again, this is our gray guy. This is right off to the left. It's pretty much pretty close. We can see our gray. Not much gap between. It's about the same on each cylinder. Our gap between our trigger identification notch and our ignition trigger signal. So let's bring that down. And I'll bring in the last thing I'll do is I'll bring the crankshaft in. Let's see how the crankshaft lines up. This is our crankshaft. Okay, this one seems pretty spot on. Let's see. Right here is the crank, which is right. It kind of overlaps the ignition trigger. Obviously, the dwell would change, but nonetheless, there's still. Let's look at one in particular. There's our crank notch, and there's our ignition trigger. Also, it could also be considered the dwell. It sort of mirrors the dwell as far as time. So let's get back to there and look at another one. Here's red guy. Here is the number 2 cylinder. That's a pretty. See, they're pretty much lined up there. You can see the relationship, the overlay. It's just a little bit to the left. And let's look at one more. The last 2 guys. Here's our crank signal again, lining right up pretty much. You can see it with our ignition strike right here. So nonetheless, this is just a video. If you ever have a situation where we want to look at this comparison, there's a direct input-output relationship to these systems. I mean, to where ignition and fuel take place. In my next video, I will do the injectors as I did the coils in this one. I just don't have my attenuators now. I got to travel about an hour to the south to get them. I kind of wish I had them. I'd also do the injectors in another video, so I can use the 4 channels for the injectors. But nonetheless, keep an eye on this situation. If you're ever diagnosing a really hard to find misfire, that all our triggers line up where they should be, and they're equidistant. Nobody's out in left field, or there's not some interloper on the signal that could be, false triggering something or something like that. Anyway, Diagnation signing off. All the best, and happy 4th of July.